Welcome to episode 9 of SCI Fridays. And today's episode is titled, What Seems to be the Problem? And today's guest is Andre Keartland.
And apparently, we're not serious enough about our intro. We've been told by someone that watches our show that we're not serious enough, so we're going to try and be serious. Before we introduce Andre, we're probably going to spend about 3 minutes just listing everything that Andre's done, because we do believe that he's the godfather. But we have one question for you, Andre. Do you know the term roll the jingle?
I don't know the term roll the jingle.
Okay.
I am lost.
I heard that.
Okay,
Don't say it again, because otherwise, we can't roll it twice.
Okay. Well, welcome to SCI Fridays, your portal into security compliance, identity management, and you. If you're new to the channel, we talk about things that get us excited, scared, mostly excited, sometimes scared, about cloud security and governance. So pull up a chair. This is a Friday. We normally talk about the last plane flying over the hill, and whiskey, wine, beer. We're an equal opportunity drinking establishment. So whatever you feel like drinking, and listen to us for the next 15 to 25 minutes, because we never know where that fits into the show. And we're just going to talk a little bit about security, compliance, and identity.
Well, I think at this point in the show, we need to establish some serious facts about Andre. And Andre, I'd like to open with talking about mafia movies. If you're an Al Pacino guy, are you more of a Scarface, say hello to my little friend, or are you I'll make him an offer he can't refuse?
I'm a godfather.
I think that's established, Al, is that we are dealing with the godfather of all things Microsoft in South Africa. Is that fair?
I do think it's fair. Let's establish certain rules here, right? Andre is the only man that I've watched allow 10 individual streams to run, right? Rebuild an entire data center over a week. No, hold on. Watch these guys build a data center, right? Like in a building. We used to smoke in the old data center, right? In the building. And then decide on the Friday he doesn't like the design, and then him single-handedly rebuild the entire data center in a weekend, right? That was my introduction to Andre. So it's like there's light that follows him, as he walks. There's just light everywhere. The clouds open and there's light. That's Andre. And that was about 12 years ago. And ever since then, he still just does that. The other thing, right? He was to present at the Azure user group that we run in Johannesburg, and he couldn't make it. And he sent 7 people to replace him, right? To present the exact topic, right, that he was going to talk on. 7 people, right? You can't top that, right? I've tried for years, and now I spend time with him talking to Microsoft about this exact topic, right? Security, compliance, and identity. And there's we can't talk about the thing that's going to happen at Build later this year, but we're very excited about that. Yeah. But how else do we introduce Andre Keartland, right? If you don't know who he is, you haven't lived. I think that's pretty much in IT, the way I come from. So you need to experience that.
Not in South Africa, nor in the Middle East. And to be fair, I think another show host first thought of Andre when he introduced a segment in his own show with other co-hosts, and he said, thinking about Andre, some say...
Oh boy.
Yeah, literally that some say that he has single-handedly built the Azure data centers in South Africa with a toothpick and a 10 spanner, right? Others, but we know him as Andre Keartland, right?
Yes.
Well, welcome to the show, Andre. It's an honor and a pleasure to have you here. You are North Star.
It's not often that I get 2 minutes worth of introduction. So thanks. I will say that some say that I carry a lot of weight in my industry, and it shows on the scale.
Oh, well done.
So coming back to the topic, what seems to be the problem? And funnily enough, when we start, and the world's changed, right? Perimeter network, it was a firewall, and we worried about inbound and outbound ports. And that was it, right? Port 80, port 443, and we felt secure. And then moving to the cloud, all of a sudden, security, compliance, governance, risk, and compliance, right, has changed. And they've created these 3-letter and 4-letter acronyms. That's all the rage. SIEM, SOAR, XDR, Cloud Security Posture Management is the latest one, right? EUBA, EUBA, and a whole bunch of things like that. And today we really wanted to talk about SIEM. So Andre, what seems to be the problem, right? I mean, where do we start when we start looking at
looking
SIEM?
for more opportunities to work that pun into the conversation. This seems to be the trend.
Yeah.
Yeah. So SIEM is all the rage, has been for many years. I think it's a term that's been and a technology has been abused by many people. It's been a lovely fig leaf for a lot of people to hide behind. So a SIEM, I mean, if we're going to do dictionary definitions, it's what security, information, and event management. At its most basic, it's a big log collector. Okay, it sits there. You set up connectors in it, and you tell it, I have security logs in lots of different places, different apps, different servers, different systems, different clouds. Bring me your logs. And they stick it all into a great big collection point somewhere. And you have great big logs. And now that is useful up to an extent already, because one of your compliance requirements very often is you need a place to put your logs. Okay, because you leave your logs on your servers with your apps. If somebody attacks you, one of the first things they're going to do is they're going to clear out the logs, because that's how they're going to get rid of their footprints. So you need the logs. So you've got the evidence that the CSI are going to need to come in and say, well, based on the blood spatter pattern, it was Professor Plum with a pickaxe in the library. So it's often a requirement that you've got to keep logs for X period of time, etc. And initially, that was to a large extent what a SIEM did. It was just a log collector. Then you go one step further and you start saying, well, now I have all of these logs, so I need to have some sort of mechanism where I can go and search these logs and find information. So again, what a SIEM often was a log analyzer, where you could go in with some sort of query language and go and search for stuff and say, okay, find me, I suspect something happened to server 7. Find me all the information for server 7. What happened to server 7 between 6 and 7 on Saturday evening? I can see something happened to user 1 as well. Show me all the interactions between user 1 and server 7. And that's where correlation started coming into it. And then finally, people would say, well, I've now got this fantastic resource. Maybe put some intelligence into it that automatically will start looking for patterns, and will start almost like a great big antivirus in the sky, be able to say, I'm seeing that you might have Solorigate on server 7, and user 1 might have been phished, and because we can see their patterns of behavior and interactions on those. So it's been a great forensic tool very often for coming afterwards and saying, what the hell just happened? Our entire company is ransomware, but at least we still have our logs, and we can then go and see, well, how did it happen? Who connected to the servers? Who logged on? What was the connection between those? And that's traditionally been what a SIEM was. And so most large enterprise organizations have had a serious background noise problem as well. Okay, apart from the background noise problems, your major enterprises have had SIEMs for compliance reasons. They needed to manage those logs and to supplement the rest of their security services. And typically, your security operations centers, your SOCs, have been their main activity is look at outputs from the SIEM, investigate, and that's when you see the pictures of a SOC with the great big screens on the wall and the maps and the colored lights flashing. Typically what you're seeing there is the outputs from the SIEMs, okay, and events that are being picked up on the SIEM that are flashing up, and where they can do their threat hunting and be able to say, okay, let's follow all of those steps, let's correlate, etc. And that's been SIEMs, but not always been a perfect solution to everything. No, what do you guys think? What's the place of a SIEM in the world?
Actually, before we answer that, I'd like to pick up on something that you said as part of your introduction, that you said that a SIEM is often a fig leaf that users hide behind, or that people hide behind, because obviously not a user issue. Tell us about that. Why is a SIEM something that gets hidden behind?
So I mentioned a few minutes ago where I said often the function of a SIEM is very forensic. It's very, well, let's look at the blood spatter patterns. Okay. Bad things have just happened and we want to understand what happened. And that's fine in its place. You know, you need to build court case, you know, to go convict. Right. You know, if we're going to go law and order, you know, more so than CSI. But it's not really great for preventing traditionally, you know, because your SIEM tended to be sort of operating in cycles, and, you know, we could figure out what happened yesterday, but it wasn't really good at telling me what's happening right now, and certainly was no good at what's going to happen tomorrow. Okay. And that's been a bit of, so where I say fig leaf is you would get IT managers, CISOs, etc. that would go, our security is great. We have two things. We have firewalls everywhere, and we have a SIEM. We have those two things, and we have antivirus. Great antivirus with names that sound very similar to burger companies. You know, then you are bulletproof. You know, the bulletproof thing. And unfortunately, then those companies would get the heck hacked out of them, and you know, at least they had a SIEM to show them afterwards what happened. So things have evolved. We've now started developing these concepts like zero trust and assume breach, you know, where we have to say, you know, what if the attackers are inside? What if the attackers have been here for 6 months? Okay, what if the attacker is about to pull the trigger and tomorrow we ransomware, or all of our, you know, all our bases are belong to you, or, you know, so, and that's where these technologies have had to evolve a little bit. And not all SIEMs are created equal, and not all SIEMs have been able to keep up with these trends. You know, so you know, if you have a SIEM, it's really good to perhaps go back and go and measure its value, not just in terms of, well, what was the price tag, what is the maintenance cost, and how many gigabytes of data is it taking up on my SAN, but what's the information it's delivering to me? What's the analysis that's coming out of this? How much of a warning is this potentially giving me for what's coming at me? Because that's where a modern, up-to-date SIEM can actually be a very, very useful tool in your armory. Okay, is that ability to take events from lots of different disparate systems and join them together and be able to say, you know, sketch you a picture. User one received a potential phishing email. User one, well, a user made a dodgy connection to an Active Directory domain controller. A user connected to a potential command and control malware server out there on the internet. A user downloaded suddenly half a terabyte worth of sensitive files from a SharePoint site. A user was suddenly trying to scan ports on our internal network. All of those events on their own, interesting. Okay, might catch a little bit of attention. But if all of those things were happening to user one on PC one, talking to server one, all within the same half an hour time frame, that suddenly becomes highly significant. Now you're probably dealing with some sort of attempted breach that's busy happening. Or maybe even worse, those things didn't happen over half an hour. They happened over a period of a week. Okay, and nobody would have noticed. But if you have something that's collecting all of these events, getting this information together, and is able to say, I'm spotting a pattern. Something really weird is going on with user one, with PC one, with server one. Okay, set off the flares. Okay, call in the parabats, because now we need to really pay attention. That is where a team can really come in if it has that deep analytic capability built straight into it. And that's what you're looking for in your team.
So as a follow-up question,
Hmm.
you mentioned putting all logs in one place. So that sounds to me like I've got some SAN capacity. I know how to build a query. I can go get something like Elasticsearch, maybe use the free version. Maybe I'll get the enterprise version and pay for it. And I'll just go commit all of my logs into that. I've got some great compression, and I'll do my own threat hunting, because you mentioned threat hunting. Surely I now have SIEM, and surely now I'm secure.
Yeah, you have SIEM in the same way that if you went and bought a whole lot of PVC piping and duct tape, you could build your own spaceship. Given enough time and effort. It's a bit like a very unfair chirp I once heard Steve Ballmer make years back. When Microsoft was still in a very anti-open source space. Yes. He went on the stage once and he said, "Open source is only free if your time has no value." Now,
wow,
not entirely fair, but that principle, yeah. Building your own security analysis solution is free, except if you don't count the time that you're having to spend building this. So what you really want is, if you can have that, a lot of that plumbing has been built for you, and a lot of the intelligence is already there. If there's already sort of pre-built analysis, hunting, that is able to go through the data, look for the patterns, and then come and highlight for you, it's probably going to find a heck of a lot more than just you sitting there going, show me which user has done a port scan, and is that significant or not? Okay, so probably you're going to get a lot more bang for your buck if you can get a very well-developed, integrated system off the shelf as much as possible. Okay, again, this is where you've sometimes got the challenge, where you start getting to fig leaf SIEMs, is you've got the SIEM, it's collecting a heck of a lot of logs, okay, it's filling up terabytes worth of data, but it's not actually doing much in the way of analysis. It doesn't really have that intelligence built into it. It doesn't understand the applications that it's busy talking to. To it, a log is a log is a log, okay, and it doesn't really have that ability to go and look through it and say, okay, I am seeing that this is of significance. Because ultimately, what you're trying to do with all of your security management solutions, you need to save manpower. Okay, what's the single most common issue that I'm hearing from security professionals, from CISOs, from people in that space? They're not complaining about the amount of malware. They're not complaining about complexity. Single thing that they complain about the most, we can't find people. We can't find security analysts to actually sit and go through and do the hunting and protect us adequately. Okay, we're being flooded of information. We're being bombarded by threats. We know we need people to look at this. We can't find those people, not for love or money. Okay, at the moment, probably your best route towards building a strong security team is go kidnap orphans and train them up through your internship program. And sometimes strategy is not very far removed from that. And that's where Batman came from.
This is true.
There's so many references to movies and series. I've never, in such a short amount of time, right? Is this where you do the segue into a managed SOC, Nick?
Well, I was about to say, because we've been lined up quite perfectly for this. And this is not a punt, but this is an acknowledgement that, Andre, you do know a little bit about protecting others and building a SOC that is of value, because you actually have done this as a managed service. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Our recent history is the company I work for is called Naturit. Within that, I'm in a unit called Innovits Consulting. And we typically implement solutions for customers, consulting business. And we've built a lot of security solutions to secure environments. amongst other things, switching on SIEMs and SOCs for some of our big customers. And finally, we just had so many of our customers that then said, okay, great, we now have this tool, but can you maybe help us run it? Can you help us optimize it? And we eventually said, okay, well, what we'll do is we'll run this on a shared basis for all of our customers. And that became in our company what we call our Natural Security and Operations Center. So it's a SOC. Okay, there's another one of those acronyms. And we essentially run this for our customers. And we will sit there, we will build them SIEMs. We mostly focus on the Microsoft Sentinel product set, which we can maybe mention a little bit more of. We integrate that into the rest of their Microsoft security strategy. We're a big time Microsoft partner, which is why we use that. And we then get security events from all of these customers. We analyze them, we hunt for threats. And then when we find them, we go out and we kill them. Okay, and bury them in places they will never be found again. And because we're doing it across multiple customers, we sort of give everybody the benefit that if we find something for one, we know to look for it in the others. Yeah. Everybody wins.
Democratized threat hunting.
So today we've heard about forensic analysis with blood spatter patterns, right? CSI, right? There's a CSI Vegas, a new drop this year. So if you want to sort of revisit what CSI was, obviously, there was a reference to kidnapping people, orphans, right? Batman and a few other things, and there was reference to gaming, right? All your bases all belong to us, and I can carry on about that. But it's interesting to note that where you are now and they've probably kidnapped all the orphans because they've got to manage SOC, right? And that's where everyone's gone. That's why nobody can hire them, because they're all in a basement somewhere worrying about threat hunting. And then he was all, I'll find you and I'll kill you, right? And it's very sort of Liam Neeson. But it does make sense, right? That people, they don't have time during the day to go find people, and it makes sense to outsource to a crowdsourced company that can actually provide you with intelligent threat hunting based on industry standards. And because they're doing it for quite a few people, chances are they'll do it better for you if you join them instead of trying to do it on your own. And it makes sense, economies of scale and all of those things. So in closing, Andre, because this is a 25-minute show, how do people get hold of you?
So I have 2 more hours of material.
We know this, right? And when we get to SCI Fridays, the late show, we'll bring Andre back for a fireside chat.
The late show.
To really delve down and talk for 2 hours about the strategic direction of where Microsoft is going with Azure Sentinel and how much of Standard Bank. Can we mention Standard Bank on the call, right?
Nope.
I don't know. We can't. I don't know if Andre's ever done stuff there. But I wasn't. No. We can't.
Never heard of it.
Okay, we're not allowed to. But how do people get hold of you, Andre? Because I would love everyone to go up to Andre and ask him for his signature, and then ask him, and then bring them. They need to bring you into the building so that you can fix everything, right? Because nobody builds stuff like Andre. How do they get hold of you?
Cool. Okay, all the usuals. I'm at Keartland on Twitter, although I barely touch it. I'm not a big social media person. You can Google Inabit. It's on my shirt. And Andre@inabits.com. Reach out to me, ping me, and I'd love to talk to people, and we can chew the fat and talk a bit about what you're doing, not doing. We can discuss fig leaves and kidnapping and murder and blood spatter patterns.
Yeah. So our take homes is don't build a SOC, get it managed, and if you are going to build a SOC, you need to kidnap orphans.
I'm going to go from one famous Microsoft CEO to another and tee you up for that segue. This is not a Steve Ballmer statement, but such a statement.
But for me, I'm not.
That's for you, Alistair.
Okay. Well, success can cause people to unlearn the habits that made them successful in the first place. I have no idea what that means, Nick. I just read it off the teleprompter over here. It's a Satya quote, and we will leave everyone with those words that they can go ponder on. So thank you very much for joining us today, Andre, and thank you to everyone watching us on LinkedIn today. I think it's going to go out at 12, or what time is it now? I actually don't know what time it is. If you like the show, please comment in the comment box down below. If you want to follow us, you can find us at Alistair Pugin. It's on the red thing over there. And Nick is at Nicholas Blank. And we'll catch you next Friday. Ciao, ciao.